Hi, everybody. This is going to be a video on how to be a delegator in the Graph Network. And so, what it's really going to go through is all the thought processes of what it means to be a delegator and how to choose the right indexers to delegate to. So it's really, a well detailed guide, kind of a workshop that is going to give you the conceptual ideas on what you need to do to be able to basically make sure you delegate to an indexer that is going to be reliable, and so that you can get a good return on your delegation that you've created in the network. And so what this guide follows is actually this guide we have right here, which will be shared with everybody. And this is detailed kind of text. I highly recommend that you read all of this before you watch this video or after you watch this video, and make sure you understand how all of it works, because this will give you the details step by step. What this video is going to be me walking through that guide and showing how to use the UI in each scenario, and it'll give you kind of the whole entire feedback loop so that you can understand what you're going to have to do by reading that document and then coming to the UI yourself and knowing what to do. So let's get started by just explaining what this UI is. So this is the network dashboard that is available to the public right now. And here's some high level data up here. It's not too relevant to what we're doing today, but it's definitely good to look at and understand. And what we're really going to look at here is this dashboard of all the indexers we see. And so just high level, what you're seeing is this is all the indexers that are participating in the network. As you can see, some of them have set their names. This is connected through ENS. So you know that they reliably own these names. This is a list of subgraphs that they are indexing. It's important to realize that, right now there's only one subgraph. It's the pooled together subgraph. That means they're earning rewards. As you can see, this indexer right here does not have the subgraph image beside their name. And that means that they're not earning any rewards at all. So this is high level stuff. You would not want to delegate to an indexer like that. If we go back up here, there's the query, the rewards cut and the fee cut. And these are going to be really important. We're going to explain these a lot. And what it means basically at a high level, this means that the indexer is keeping 80% of the rewards for themselves. Therefore, the delegator is getting 20% of the rewards. And that works for both the fee cut and the reward cut the exact same way. The cooldown remaining, this is the amount of time that an indexer has to wait until they can update their query fee cut and reward cut. So these will be stuck at 80% for 12 days and 22 hours, and that's really good to know. This indexer could change this from 75 to 0 or 75 to 100 at any moment's notice. That's good to know. We'll get into that a little bit more. This is the stake owned. This is obviously the stake that the indexer has put on the line themselves, which means this stake is slashable. And then here's the delegated stake, which is the amount that other people have delegated to this indexer. Query fees, as you can see right now, are all showing 0. There's no query fees being processed right now. They will be very soon, which will mean that this value will become more important. As you can see, that this query fees relates to the fee cut, and indexer rewards relates to the rewards cut. And so right now, maybe it's not as important to look at the query fee cut over here, because right now query fees are 0. If you filter on it, it'll always be 0 for now. But that will be updating soon. And as a delegator, you should be paying attention to the network, because query fees are very competitive and they might start earning good rewards soon in the future. And you have to be able to determine which indexers are giving a good amount of query fees. Now, right now, what we're seeing in the network are indexing rewards. And as you can see, you can sort on this. You see which indexes have collected the most. And you can scroll down, and a lot of these indexers have names, which is great. As you can see, these are the indexers that have participated in the testnet and have been around for months working on the testnet with the graph. And basically, they're more reliable to delegate to, and we'll get into more details on that. But as long as you can see that they've earned indexing rewards, it's a good sign. There's a lot of indexers who have 0. If you scroll down, I'm not going to load more, but if you scroll down, they could just be sitting there not really doing anything and indexing or staked in the network. So you wouldn't want to delegate to them. This is a high level overview. Now let's just go over the actual guide itself. So this guide is broken up into 3 sections, and really it's only 2 sections for us because the 3rd section is going to be this video. And basically it's the risks that a delegator has to consider, and then we're going to explain how to calculate the expected returns as a delegator. So really I want to go over the risks first, because although you can't get slashed as a delegator, there are risks that you have to consider. You'll never get your tokens stolen from you through the contracts. There's no way for an indexer to do that, but they can take advantage of you in some ways. So there's some things we need to understand. The first and most obvious one is the delegation fee. And basically you're going to be charged 0.5% every time you delegate. So if I choose an indexer to delegate to, it'll say right here, there is a 0.5% tax charge upon delegation. Simply, that means if I did 1,000 GRT, I would lose 5 GRT. It would not go to this indexer. It would get burnt. And now I have 995 GRT. And essentially, as a delegator, you just have to think through. We're gonna explain how to calculate returns next, but you have to think, how long is it going to take me to earn back those 5 GRT that I lost? Because that is like a loss that you're going to get. And as a delegator, you want to know that you'll recover that in a short period of time and start making profit. So that's really simple to understand, but very important to pay attention to that. And the next risk we're going to talk about is the delegation unbonding period. Basically, whenever you want to undelegate, your tokens are subject to a 28-day unbonding period. And this means you won't be able to transfer them at all or earn any rewards. And this is also explained here as well before you delegate. And so the reason for this, I won't get into it now, but it's part of the protocol. It's part of the economic security of the protocol that we're locking your tokens for 28 days. It's not as simple as you can just undelegate and get them back in your wallet. There's a reason for all of this happening, and it's part of the economic security. And we won't get into that for this guide, but just understand that these are 2 things that are around. And although the delegation tax percentage and the undelegating period can change through governance, through changing the parameters, they will always be there. So those are 2 main risks you have to understand, and the risk of having your tokens locked for 28 days is they won't be earning rewards when you are undelegating. So really, in a sense, you are losing graph tokens because you're not delegating them. You could be earning a return, right? So you're not burning rewards essentially, but you are losing profit. And now this one is a lot more complex. So we're going to dig into it a little bit, and it's choosing a trustworthy indexer with a good return who will provide you with a good return. And so the main thing to focus on right now is, let's go through the 3 delegation parameters we have right here. I already briefly went over them. Let's go to the delegation guide and explain the indexing reward cut. So as I said, if the delegator sets it to 100%, that's a bad sign. It means the delegator is getting no rewards. So what you want to see is something like 16%, even 78%, 20%. These are good. It means that the delegators are getting more rewards. Having, this person has 16.92, which is, this person has 14 down here. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're offering the best return, although it's a good signal because they're giving a lot of rewards to the delegators. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the best, and we're going to get into that later. But it's important to know that in general, if this is low, it's good. Same thing goes for the query fee cut. Right now, you're going to have to look at how many rewards, when query fees start coming in, you're going to have to look how much query fees are paying out. how much indexing rewards are paying out, and you're going to have to determine as a delegator which one is more important, because they could have the query fees set to 0%, which means you're getting all the query fees. But if they're only earning 100 GRT and then indexing rewards are 439K, obviously it's a lot more important what this value is to you in that situation. So there's a lot of considerations to do here, and we're going to get into the math a little bit later, or at least explaining how to think about it. But what's really important is the cooldown remaining. And as I explained before, this is the ability to change your parameters in the protocol. So there's an explanation of it here in text. And as you can see, there's also a parameter cooldown section over here. As you can see, cooldown remaining, you'll see it before you delegate. You can also see it in the table. Basically, what this means is, an indexer is saying, I'm keeping 80% for myself. I'm giving 20% to indexers, and it's going to be like this for the next 12 days, which is really reassuring to a delegator, because that means those rewards are guaranteed. The second they change it to 100%, they're keeping 100% for themselves, and they can actually kind of do a bait and switch on you. So they could bait you in by setting it to something like 14, get a lot of people to delegate to them, and then they could switch it to 100, and then they would be keeping all the rewards. And that is really a dishonest move. And that's why we really highly recommend you go into the Graph Discord and actually figure out, talk to people in there, figure out who the reliable indexers are. The names here are pretty reliable. That means they've been around, they figured out how to do it. This is early days, but really you should go into the chat, and you can even direct message these indexers yourself, and get to know who they are, and ask people and see that they've had a reputation and that they don't change these delegation parameters on their users, which is really good. But what we might see in the future is that these cooldowns are actually increased to 30 days or maybe even 60 days, so that what the rewards cut will be for a while. Another thing to keep in mind here is that right now, to not get into too many details into the protocol, but an indexer doesn't have to claim their rewards for 28 days. Now, what we've been seeing is that the earliest they can claim them is 1 day, and the longest is typically like 28 days. So these indexers over here who have collected, 439,000 GRT, they're actually going in and usually probably collecting the rewards every day. So they're up here, and it's high, and that's good for a delegator. But they also could wait 28 days, and then it would be one big chunk that gets given to them. So as a delegator, you also have to pay attention. Although this indexer right here has it set to 80, and they have been collecting rewards every day, they could technically wait 28 days. This time could run out, and then they could switch on you again. Switch it to 100, keep all the rewards for themselves. So as you can see, it's really important to pay attention to the dynamics of the cooldown. And honestly, in the early days of the network, you should really figure out who are the reliable indexers to stake to. You should go on Discord, you should figure that out. You shouldn't just pick the indexer with the lowest percentage, because you might get tricked by them. And then your rewards will, A, you will not earn any rewards for that time you indexed or you delegated to them. And B, when you'll want to undelegate from them because they kind of did a bait and switch on you, and then you're gonna have to wait 28 days and not earn any rewards. So that's why it's really important to do your due diligence and figure out which indexers are reliable, because to be honest, there are economic incentives here for the indexers to be honest, because an honest indexer will get a lot of delegation and they will end up getting more profit, and it all works in the right direction. So that's why we can expect to see these indexers to act honestly. And basically, this is all explained more in here. So if this video is going a little bit too fast, then you can go here and reiterate and watch the video again. And that's really all explained there in the guide. So next, let's get into calculating delegator's expected return. And I might have touched on this a bit in the last 10, 15 minutes. But really, it's important to, there's different levels of this. I know some people may not be as technical. Some people may be very technical. And so you can determine the exact return rate that each delegator is giving you. But you also don't necessarily have to do all that math. You can actually determine it by looking at the numbers and getting the general sense. So this is why I'm describing here, as a less technical delegator, you can come to the network UI, you can look here, you can know in general right now, rewards cut that are low is a really good sign. If they're collecting indexer rewards, that's a good sign. If they better make sure they're indexing at least one subgraph. It will get more complex when there's more subgraphs because each subgraph will be returning more rewards. And so, like I said, a delegator who doesn't want to get too technical will more so just look, what's the reward cut? How many tokens are owned and delegated? So these two are added up. So, this guy has 50 million delegated to himself, 3 million of his own. So he has 53 million graph tokens that are earning rewards. And that means that you're going to be getting, this means the delegator will be getting 90% of that earning reward power, which is really good. But you see that they've only collected 25,000, which is low, and they don't have a name. So as a high level delegator, I would probably still go, into the Discord, try to figure out who these people are, try to figure out they have a good reputation and they're not going to just switch these rewards to 100% and keep everything for themselves. And that is fairly safe. If you go into the Discord, find out who is reliable, and then, in general, that this number low is a good thing and that they are collecting rewards, that is a good thing. And another thing you want to consider is how much they have delegated to them. We'll get into that soon. But in general, that's what I would look at, or, we can get into it right now because this is high level. So we're going to say let's delegate to this indexer. And they have this delegation remaining, so 330 million. That's good. That means this delegator can take 330 more million stake. Let's look at one who might be over delegated. So this indexer is over delegated at 7%. That means although they have 65 million tokens, they can really only use about 61 million of those. So that means they have 65 total. What this means is, to keep it simple, essentially, when you're over delegated, when an indexer is over delegated, their stake is the delegators' rewards are being diluted. Same with the indexers, because you have 68 million stake, but you're only really using 65 of it in the protocol to earn rewards. So you're all getting diluted. You could take that 3 million somewhere and put it somewhere else, and then that would be earning rewards. So it's not a good thing if the indexer is over delegated. So if you see this, it's not good. Technically speaking, it still could offer a better return, right? Because, some indexer could be keeping 99% of the rewards for themselves. And so in that scenario, you'd still want to go delegate to this person because they're offering 90% to you. And they're over delegated, but it's better. So it doesn't necessarily mean the returns will be worse if they're over delegated, but it's not a good sign, essentially. And it's, if you're going to be safe and you don't want to do the math, I probably wouldn't pick one of those indexers to delegate to. So that's very high level. If you don't understand a ton about the indexing process, if you don't want to do the math, I would just follow what I laid out there. And you should be able to find some good indexers. And if worse comes to worse, just ask people in Discord. A lot of the indexers are there all the time and active. And you can DM them yourselves and they can explain to you why they're a good indexer. A lot of them have delegation guides themselves. A lot of them have blogs and explaining what their whole entire plan is and how they're going to be indexers on the network. So there's a lot of information out there for you to determine. And now, so a more technical delegator can basically do some math and figure out how many rewards an indexer is going to get. So let's focus on that right now. So as you can see, if we go like this, sort indexers to the top, this indexer has earned 440K GRT, which is really good. And then you look at maybe this indexer down here, 163K, but they have way more delegated. So there are a lot of dynamics at play here. If these indexers are claiming rewards every day, it means, you know, the network only launched about a week ago. And if you were one of the first indexers, you might have claimed a lot of rewards the first day because there weren't many people indexing. So this indexer likely increased their stake recently and got a lot of delegation recently. And now what's happening is they are earning a ton of rewards. But this might slowly catch up, right? This might surpass 439K in a couple of days. So what I'm talking about here is doing the math to figure out which indexer actually has a lot of stake owned, a lot of stake delegated, and what the rewards cut is, and then determining what their indexing rewards that they would earn the next day are going to be. And you would, you know, if you're going to do this and you were a experienced delegator who wants to do some math, you could actually create a spreadsheet that takes in all these numbers and then calculates what the expected return will be for that indexer. And then you could figure out what your return would be for that day if you index to them. Now it gets a little bit more complex when you need to extrapolate the future because there are dynamics at play here. And you have to consider that, you know, if this indexer is close to over delegated, only 8 million left, whereas this indexer has 330 million, you're gonna have to think an indexer is really limited by the amount of GRT that they're staking on their own. So if you do all this math, you'll be able to see who is expected to make what the next day. And if you have some experience in the network, you might know who's good, you might know who's growing. And what you want to do as a delegator, you want to project into the future because you're for sure locked to this index for 28 days. So not only do you want to pick an indexer who's looking good right now, you want to pick one who will hopefully keep the rewards cut at a good, reasonable amount for you and is going to be reliable and will be picking the right subgraphs. So that's a little bit more detailed as well. Each subgraph has an amount of signal on it, and that's all done through curation. And whichever subgraph has more signal on it actually will receive more rewards. So because there's only one subgraph everybody's indexing right now, it's pretty easy to do this calculation. You could just take this sheet right here and all the information here, and you could do that calculation. When there are more subgraphs, it gets a lot more complex. And you know, I would invite a smart delegator, and the indexers will be doing this as well. They need to figure out where they can get their best return. And that's where it comes down to, if you trust an indexer and you know they're smart and they're dynamic, as a delegator, you might not have to do all these calculations. If you talk to the indexer and you know they understand how the rewards work and that they're indexing the right subgraphs, that means they're getting the most rewards, which means you in turn are getting the most rewards. So it's very possible that an indexer that's offering 80%, who's really good, could be giving you a better return than an indexer who's offering you, or sorry, this indexer would be offering you 80%. They could be doing a poor job. This indexer would be offering you 20%, but you could actually get more rewards. So this is where it starts to get really complex. It also, I haven't mentioned the query fees. You're also going to have to factor that in when those come into play. So, you know, there'll be more subgraphs, there'll be more query fees, and you'll have to compare that to how much the indexing rewards are and do that kind of math and figure out which indexer is the best one to delegate to. As you can see, it starts to get very technical and very complex, and you can really narrow down who are the good indexers in the network. And, you know, this kind of just explains a little bit more on how you would calculate the rewards. I've talked about this, so we won't go over it, but it's in the guide as well. And what's important to understand, I've kind of briefly talked about this in the last 10 minutes, but essentially, you know, there are instances where delegating to somebody who's keeping 80% for themselves may not be as good as someone who's giving you, about 80% of the rewards. And what comes into play is the delegation pool and the portion of it that you own. So if you delegate 20 million into this pool, it would increase it to about 220 million, which means you're owning about 9% of that pool. So you're getting 9% of the rewards that this indexer is giving, and they're giving 80% of their total rewards. So you can do that math. You can figure out how many rewards the delegation pool is going to get, which is basically this function right here. And if you're going to deposit 20 million, you can do this function, and you're basically, so this is how the pool is always rebalancing itself, the delegator pool. So when you buy into this pool, you basically now own 9% of it, which means you're going to get 9% of the rewards. And this is based on kind of this rebalancing of the shares. And if you do the math, which I explain here in this example, it can turn out that you may want to delegate to an indexer who's only offering 20% to delegators. So here's the situation. They have 29 million of their own stake and 1 million delegated stake. So that's 30 million total. And they earn 10,000 in rewards. 20% of that is 2,000. So that means if you do the math, for every 1,000 delegated tokens, you would earn 2 GRT. That's just taking, the 1 million delegated tokens, basically dividing it by 2,000. And so if we continue on and we go through this one, there's an indexer who has 1 million of their own stake, but 9 million delegated stake. And they're giving 90% to delegators. So they earn 10,000 and they're giving 9,000 to delegators. But you have to divvy up that 9,000 between 9 million delegated stake, which means for every 1,000 tokens, you only earn 1 graph token. And like we said up here, for every 1,000, you're earning 2 tokens. So there's some simple math that we need to consider when we're being a delegator, because you can go to some of these indexers and do the math and realize that one pool is actually under delegated to. And so it's worthwhile for you to put your stake in that one. So as you can see, there's a lot at play here to consider when you want to be a delegator. And lastly, considering the delegation capacity, I already explained this when I was talking about the high level stuff about 5 minutes ago. Essentially, it's just, the current delegation ratio is set to 16. That means if an indexer has 1 million GRT, they can use 16 million GRT of delegated tokens. Anything over that amount will dilute the delegator rewards. And that essentially means you're probably not getting a great return when in any indexer that is over delegated. And I can't remember which one was over delegated here. If we go here, we might be able to see it. Yeah, I think this indexer is over delegated. 7%. You could still calculate the return and it'll probably be better than some of the indexers out there. But just know that when you're doing if you're doing a lot of math and you're trying to figure out the exact return for all indexers, you have to take this into consideration. And so that kind of goes over all the high level details that we have to worry about. And I'll quickly just go through a couple of steps that we would have to do just to show how the UI works. So let's say you've gone through this whole entire process and you've everything I just explained there, and you decide, okay, you're going to delegate to stakingfacilities.eth. You click on delegate. You look at their indexing reward cut, the query fee cut, the cooldown amount. You're happy with all these. Delegation remaining 142. That's great. Delegation received, these are just how much has been delegated to them, their max capacity. That is the amount, basically the delegation remaining plus delegation received. We see my wallet, I have 35 GRT. I have 0 delegation to staking facilities. That's fine. We are going to, if we were doing this, what happens is we go submit transaction, MetaMask pops up and it asks me to allow GRT to be spent in the network. If you notice, it is set to exactly 3 3 GRT. I'm not going to actually run this transaction right now. Gas is very high and it'll go a little bit slow, but basically we're approving GRT to be pulled by the network. I rejected that transaction, but what would happen is 3 would be approved. You know, if you're going to do this a lot, it might be worth it to edit that MetaMask transaction and approve whatever you're going to do, 100,000 tokens, so that you don't have to do approve multiple times. And then another transaction is going to pop up when you do that, and you're just going to submit delegate, and that transaction will go through. And at that point, you will be delegated to that indexer. And if we then go to this indexer, I have previously delegated to them, and I have actually also undelegated. So when you want to undelegate, essentially you would come here and delegation remaining would show up as, in this scenario, would have been 2. So what I did before this meeting or before this video is I undelegated 2. I click this, I submitted a transaction. Reminder that it's 28-day unthawing period. That transaction goes through. And now I have these 2 tokens that are undelegating. And the time left is 27 days and 8 hours because I did this last night. And when that happens, when these 28 days are up, I can click on this indexer, and I would go into the undelegate tab, and I would click withdraw. And there'd be a button there that'll let me withdraw these 2 GRT, and that will then put those tokens into my wallet. And that is how you can be a delegator in the network, how you can think through the process, and how you can use the UI. The UI, it's actually only a few buttons to click. It's super simple. But the hard part is thinking through where you have to put all your, make the decisions to put your money. Because if you have a good amount of GRT, it's a lot of money at play, and you want to be able to use it effectively. So thanks for listening, and please, refer to this video if you need a refresher, or use the delegation guide if you like learning that way and learning things a little bit more step by step. And thank you very much for watching.